Hello. If you're watching this, thanks for joining. My name is Mehdi. This is a new thing I'm trying, so this is my first stream. Um, this is going to be something I'll do every once in a while. Try to get comfortable with, coding on stream and share some of what I do. So if you're watching this, you might be interested in Advent of Code or Rust, or um, you might have just stumbled onto this by accident. So thanks for watching. I'll probably also record these and put them on YouTube for folks that are going to want to watch later. So um, without further ado, I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Okay, so if you haven't heard of Advent of Code before, it's basically a annual code challenge that pops up every year around Christmas time, which is basically a series of code challenges that you would need to solve. Um, that would give you a star, and you can progress to the next one. So there's 50 challenges in total, and the point of it is nothing at all. It's basically for bragging rights and fun and learning. So this year I'm using it to learn Rust. It's a new language for me. I'm a JavaScript programmer by day, so spending this December getting comfortable with Rust, which is, if you're not familiar with it, a systems programming language. So you're going to see a lot of fumbling around and kind of looking at documentation and learning as we go. I've worked with Rust very, very briefly, so don't have much of an understanding of the language, but we're going to be learning as we go. So it's going to be fun. So let's go ahead and get started. What I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder or a new Rust project. So I'm going to be using Cargo, which is kind of a build tool and package manager for Rust. And I'm just going to go ahead and create a new Rust project for day one of Advent of Code. And what this will do is create a new folder, which just has a source folder and a cargo.toml. So before I go ahead and open that up and start coding, I'm just going to navigate over to my browser and we can look at today's challenge. Now, full disclosure, I looked at this last night just to get an idea of what the heck I was doing on my first stream. So I know kind of a little bit of what I'm going to be doing and how I'm going to be solving this, but we're going to go through it together and hopefully it'll be relatively painless. I don't know what the second challenge is, but I do know what the first one is. So let's just go ahead and look at this. The first couple of paragraphs here are just covering what we talked about. So we're going to be solving challenges, getting stars, and we need to collect all 50 of our stars to win. Each challenge is going to award me 1 star, and then here is the challenge itself. So before you leave the elves in accounting, just need you to fix your expense report, which is your puzzle input. Apparently something isn't quite adding up. Specifically, they need you to find the 2 entries that sum to 2020 and then multiply those 2 numbers together. For example, suppose your expense report contains the following. And here's a sequence of numbers. In this list, the 2 entries that sum to 2020 are 1721 and 299. Multiplying them together produces 1721 times 299 equals 514579. So that would be the correct answer. Of course, your expense report is much larger. Find the 2 entries that sum to 2020. What do you get if you multiply them together? So I do need to, I think, authenticate. Okay. So now we have our puzzle input. And I'm going to go ahead and open this up in a new tab. You can see it's just a big dump of data. And so we're going to be using this. You probably can't see it very well on the screen. It's really just a sequence of numbers. So we're going to be taking this and using it as our input in our code. Now I'm going to open my project folder in VS Code, which is my code editor of choice. and make this fill the screen. Great. You can see we have our source folder, which just has a hello world function. I'm a little familiar with Rust syntax, but I'm going to be looking up probably even the most basic things like for loops and print functions and print macros, stuff like that. So don't be alarmed. This is just hopefully by day, by day 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or so, we'll be looking at some more complicated parts of Rust. And if you haven't worked with Rust before, Rust is kind of like pair programming with your compiler. The compiler is very chatty and very helpful. So in my experience working through the Rust-Lang book, which is kind of the official guide for learning Rust. This is a fantastic book, by the way, if you're interested in learning Rust. Steve Klabnik and Carol Nichols are the authors, and you learn a lot about the compiler and kind of what it does to help you write better code. So the main benefit of Rust as a systems language is that it does more at compile time, so that you have to worry about less at runtime, and gives you a lot of kind of high-level feeling syntax, but ultimately is a systems language. So you're going to be worrying about things like memory management, but not manually. There's this concept of a borrow checker in Rust, which I'm excited to get more comfortable with because it's very novel to me. So I'm going to be kind of flipping back and forth between my code editor and the Rust-Lang book. And that includes, for really basic things as well for now. So I think the first thing I want to do is actually bring our input data in. I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to create a new file in my source folder. I'm going to call it data.txt, and just paste all of this in. So what we're going to want to do is, first of all, we can write some pseudocode. We're going to want to pull in our input data, and this is going to be something we do over and over again, probably in this App in a Code challenge. Next, we're going to want to read our data and look for combinations that add up to 2020. Now this is like not very detailed pseudocode. I have an idea of how I want to solve this, but we're going to add to it in a bit. Before I do that though, I want to set up kind of a development loop. All right, so let me actually make sure I have a Rust Analyzer extension installed. So if you haven't worked with Rust and VS Code before, there is there's a Rust official extension. So we're going to install that. And I believe there's another VS Code extension called Rust Analyzer, which is very popular. And it's an alternative, but we're not going to install this right now. I know that some folks have recommended this before to me, but I'm going to wait on this and then only do it if I need to. So hopefully this should give us some code hinting and IntelliSense and all that kind of wonderful stuff. Okay, well, maybe not. So let's go back and look at how we even print, because I went ahead and delete that line, and I want to go ahead and make a habit of going back and forth between the docs. So we're going to just print a line, make sure our program is actually running, hello world, and then Cargo being our build and kind of dependency management tool. I'm going to use Cargo to run my program, and I'm not in the actual project directory, so if I run cargo run, I should actually compile my program and run it. Okay, looks like I have a permissions error. All right, looks like the the compiler is running into some kind of permissions error. I'm not sure if that's related to me using Windows subsystem on Linux, but we're just going to kind of ignore this for now, and I'll figure it out later. But we see that hello world was printed, so that's good. That's a great sign. It means that our program is running and we didn't have any compile errors. All right, so next I'm just going to kind of step through this again sequentially. I know that I want to pull in our data, so I know we're going to need to work with the file system. I have this data.txt file, so I'm going to be pulling this in, reading the file, reading it as a string, and probably going to want to create some kind of ordered data structure, maybe like an iterator or something like that for all of these data points. So I'm going to be wanting to split this by a new line or something to that effect. So I'm going to go ahead and refer to my trusty friend Google and read file in Rust. And the reason I'm doing this for Advent of Code is because I've tried to go through this book from start to finish, and it wasn't a very effective way for me to learn the language. So I feel like kind of, pulling things as needed and learning as needed might be a better method. So we're going to try that out. So it looks like there is a file system module in the standard library. If you're not familiar with Rust imports or module syntax, you can use the use statement to kind of pull in a namespace, and this would allow you to invoke static methods on the file system namespace, such as this one. So I'm going to be pulling in standard fs. Great. Now I am going to look at my file by using the file system read to string file name. So let data equals file system to string. Double quote strings. So this compiles, but I have an unused variable, which makes sense. Now I'm wondering why I'm not getting actual syntax highlighting here. And I wonder if there's anything I can do about that. Some Rust components not installed. Install, yes. That makes sense. So it looks like there's like a Rust analysis dependency that that I needed. So now I actually have squigglies, which is a good sign. I get my compiler hints directly in my editor, so I get a nice IDE experience here in VS Code, and I'm going to install my VS Code update later. But this is great because I don't have to kind of run, like compile and run my program every single time I want to check something for errors. So looking at this code example, it looks like, so actually here, so this is one interesting thing about Rust is that Rust doesn't have like exceptions the way that I'm used to having exceptions in JavaScript or other related languages. There is this notion of like a result type or an option type in Rust that will either resolve to a like what you expect, like the type that you expect, in this case a string, or an error. And Rust kind of puts you in a position, from my understanding, to handle that right on the spot. Or, if you're really, really brave, to say that I don't need to handle this right now, and I'm sure that this is going to be fine. So I think if I understand unwrap correctly, I think I should be able to use unwrap here. So if I were to copy this line down here with text, and then make this data, and then unwrap. Don't need this terminal session. I should be able to do cargo run. Interesting. Okay, so I did thread main panic that. All right, so maybe I was wrong. No such file or directory. And I wonder if it is because I'm not using a relative path here. So got my file name. I'm not sure why I'm not able to use a path to the file here. Let me look at a couple of other code examples and see if there's a better example of this. How to get a path from file path. Interesting. Reading a file. So I'm not actually sure what is, you know what? I wonder if I'm in the wrong directory. So if I were to OS lister, okay. So if we were to use standard file system read directory, we would probably get an idea of what directory we're in, like the context of where this code is running. So I kind of want to do that. I'm not actually sure what our issue now is, but let's find out. Okay, so so that explains everything. It looks like the current directory that this code is like the context of this code is not in the source directory, which makes total sense now that I think about it. And so obviously this relative path to data.txt would be nothing. Rather than try to change the path, I'm going to actually just move my file because that feels better. Okay, that is confusing. Wrong directory again, that makes sense. Hey, there we go. So now we're actually printing all of our data. So of course, what we would expect to be like the most trivial part of solving a code challenge, which is just reading a file, is the one that gives us the most headaches. So so now we have all of our data here inside of this data iterator. And what I'm going to do is, rather than iterate over the data here, I'm actually, or I guess what I want to do is put all of this into a set, because I'm going to kind of explain the approach I'm going to take. So rather than just this comment, I'm going to erase this, and I'm going to say iterate from 1 to 1010. The reason I do this is because we are looking for a combination of numbers that add up to 2020. So kind of like the only possible combinations that you're going to have are some number less than 1010 and some number greater than 1010, or a pair of 1010s. So if we have two 1010s in our data, then those are going to be the two that we're looking at. But aside from that, we're basically going to iterate from 1 to 1010, and then subtract that from 2020, and then look to see if both of those values are in our data set. This is kind of better than iterating over every single item, subtracting 2020, and then looking for that other one in the set as well. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Well, so let me maybe find a pair of values that add to 2020. So first, iterate from 1 to 1010. 2, I'm going to find the complementary value. 3, check to make sure that both values are in our data set. So if that's the case, if this condition passes, then we know that we have the right two values. Great. So back to basics. We're going to look at loops. And so it looks like Rust has a loop keyword. I'm not sure if this is the simplest way to do just like a for loop. Maybe variable is mutability, control flow. There we go. Expressions. Come on, come on, come on. A repetition with loops. There we go. Okay, so the loop keyword is kind of, I guess, the simplest way to write a loop in Rust. So we can declare a variable, and notice we have this mute keyword here. We haven't looked at this yet, but Rust expects you to declare variables as mutable up front so that it knows to expect mutations. So we're going to create a counter. We're going to create a mutable variable to store that, and then I'm going to loop and iterate and try to find our values that we were looking for. So let's go back to our editor. Let mute counter equals 1. Loop. Val1 equals counter. Let val2 equals 2020 minus counter. So so here if val is, or if counter is 1, then val2 is going to be 2019, and they're going to add to 2020. Now so this is like the find the complementary value, and then now we need to make sure that both the values are in our data set. So I just realized that well, first of all, we need to break out of this loop first. So let me do that. So if counter is 10, break counter times 2. So it looks like loops in Rust can return, which is kind of interesting. I would imagine in our use case, we would probably want to return with a tuple or a tuple, depending on kind of how you pronounce it, of our two values, something like that we would be able to print. Or we would just return with the multiplication of the two, so we could just get our challenge result. So if counter is 10, then break. So I'm just going to basically go back and put an exit condition on our loop. If counter 1010, and what's the syntax here? Just open and break. Okay, so now we actually need to check. Before that, I'm going to put all of our data in a set. Right now, this is a big string separated by new lines. So Rust fs read to string split by new line. So apparently, this is one example that there's a couple different ways to do this. Buff reader. Interesting. Okay. So we're going to do this. I'm going to copy this little snippet of code. And instead of what we're doing here, I'm going to open our file, which is going to be data.txt. I'm going to create a new buff reader and iterate over that, over the lines. And then actually, instead of printing, I want to put this in a hash set. Now, we do need to pull in some other modules. Here we don't have file. I wonder if we can, no quick fix is available. I was wondering if VS Code can just kind of do it for me. But let's look at what the, so standard FS file and then standard IO. So let's just go ahead and pull these as well. Get rid of that and get rid of this. If I understand Rust correctly, I should be able to do, maybe not. What is, okay. Where is the question mark? Oh, there we go. Okay, let's just do that. And then file. All right, so it looks like I quieted down the compiler using unwrap. And here, this should be, let me actually just print this and cargo run. Okay, so cannot use, let's look at the compiler error here. Cannot, well, let's put our question mark back in. What are you telling me? Cannot use the question mark operator in a function that returns this. So first, let's go and look at what the question mark operator is. Great, so Rust has gained a new operator that makes error handling more pleasant by reducing the visual noise involved. Let's look at this example. Read username from file. So this returns a result, which is either going to be a string or an IO error. And I suppose, so what the, okay. So this is an example of these kind of like match statements in Rust. This is how Rust does pattern matching, where if you have an option type or a result type, this, you would explicitly handle, so in this example, file open returns a result type, and you're capturing that in a variable, but you're writing this pattern matching code where if your result is okay, then you return the file. If there's an error, you just return out of the function entirely. So either you bind to the file or you return the function entirely with an error. And it looks like the question mark here is basically just a shortcut for that. So I'm not going to use the shortcut because it's kind of confusing. But I do think I need to, well, I'm gonna use the shortcut, but I'm not gonna try to understand it. But I do think I need to change the return type of my function, which is that this is going to be, and probably is going to tell me my main function can't return the type. Okay, and that just means that that maybe I should let's look at this example. So so maybe if I use a match statement here, I wonder if I could do that. So here, like match f in this case, like I could do something like this, right? And then maybe I shouldn't use data. What am I doing wrong? So maybe if I just do let me look at the documentation for buff reader. Oh, okay. So I could do line unwrap if I don't want to handle. So I wonder if I could just do this and get rid of, get rid of my, okay. Let's get some good news. There we go. Fantastic. That was painful, but we are almost there. Now, I believe I can use the hash set to store this data, so I could just use this collection type. And then initialize it using this hash set new. So I'm going to say let expenses equals hash set new. What is it going to tell me? Type annotations needed for, okay. So do I need to give it a type for my hash set? I don't know, but I do think I need to have a mutable type. And then here I do need to maybe insert. So let expense equal line unwrap. And this is going to be a string, so Rust parse string as int. See if we can do that. So that looks something like this. And so in this case, my string is going to be this return value. Oh, okay. Or maybe, I actually don't know what the type of this is. So if we look at the buff reader type, let's look at methods. And what we're doing is calling new, that's returning this buff reader type. Interesting. So I almost feel like this is not really the right thing that we should be using. Cross split string by new line. Now I wonder if I can just use file system read to string and split it into an iterator using like just by the new line character. So equals file system read to string path p, which is going to be data.txt unwrap and split. And what does collect return? So let's go back and look at our example. This gives an iterator which you can, so that collects it into a vector. For s and split, you can print line split. Okay, and I'm doing exactly what this is telling me, but not sure why. Maybe if we do split white space, why I can't just print each line. Let's see what the compiler gives me. Split white space cannot be formatted with the default formatter. Google this. Okay, so of course this is this would be the most challenging part, right? Rest split white space to int. So I want to look at this Rust map. Well, this is not exactly what I wanted, but I think this is what I wanted. And I want to kind of map this this collection of strings to integers, and I wonder if I can basically just do this. So if data was vec I32, so the compiler here isn't yelling at me, which is progress. Let me format my code, and then here I can see that I can't print because my type isn't implementing like a display trait. So I remember reading about traits in Rust, and I don't quite understand them yet, but I wonder if there is some other way to print this. Interesting. So this colon question mark formatter, I wonder what this does and why I can't use it. Okay, so that looked like an ownership type of issue. So this is giving me this this vector, and it's actually printing my data. But now I wonder, how can I see if a value is in this data type? Rest is value in vector. My all caps is on. How to check if a thing is in a vector? Contains. Okay. Can I do? Let's take one of these values, like 1858. Okay, great. All right, so that's fantastic. So I need to first of all kill this. That just made me so happy. So there's this idea of ownership, and I haven't gotten to ownership in Rest, which is why I'm so confused about everything here. But I can check, this will get me going. I can check whether this vector type contains a particular value by declaring it and passing kind of like a borrowed reference to it, which is what this ampersand is. I'm sure as I kind of finish this stream and go back and look in a mirror and read more from Rust documentation, I'll get more comfortable with this concept. And hopefully next time I won't be wrestling with this as much. But for now, let's write it this way. So here's my counter. Here are my two values. And now we actually have a data type that contains all of our expenses as integers, and we don't need all of this stuff. And what I'm going to do is check to make sure both of these are inside of this collection of integers. So let's look at Rust conditionals, if else. And what I want to do is like check for two conditions, right? Which are basically that both of these are inside of the collection. So I'm going to say if val1, or rather if data contains ampersand val1 and data contains ampersand val2, print line val1 times val2. Is this going to work? No. Okay. I know what's going on. We are not actually iterating. That's important, right? So let's say counter plus equals 1. And let's run it again. Yay, we actually get a value, and our function returns. So this should be, well, let's actually print both the other values as well. So print line val1, so first expense, second expense, val2. So now we're going to print our two values and then print the result. Let's run it again. First expense is 485, second expense is 1535, and this should be the answer. So I'm going to go back, day 1, answer, enter, submit. Great, and we get a gold star. Finally, after like 45 minutes of juggling documentation, we get our first star. So hopefully the second one should be much quicker. Let's see what it is. The elves in accounting are thankful for your help. One of them even offers you a starfish coin that they have left over from a past vacation. They offer you a second one if you can find 3 numbers in your expense report that meet the same criteria. Using the above example again, the 3 entries that sum to 2020 are, okay, so basically this is saying instead of 2, we need 3 numbers, and that's going to be much harder. Using the above example again, the 3 entries that sum to 2020 are 979, 366, and 675. Multiplying them together produces the answer, which is 241861950. So in your expense report, what is the product of the 3 entries that sum to 2020? Oof, okay, so that's going to be quite a bit harder. And the reason for that is because this adds like another level of, if we're just purely, iterating, this adds like a whole nother level. So let's think about this. So we have quite a few inputs, and I think it's very unlikely that any of the values that are very high are going to be like it's very likely that you're going to have values that are low be at least one of the values that you're looking for, right? So I almost wonder if approaching this from the standpoint of like if having a sorted collection would be helpful here, because if we're looking at this data, a lot of the values are kind of 1900, 1800 and over, and so these aren't going to like pair well with one another. Okay, so let's think about this a bit. Rust vector sort. Oh, interesting. Okay, so I can just sort. What is it telling me? I can't do. Cannot infer type for type parameter b declared on associated function collect. Oh, I see. So I need to use this, right? No? Okay, well. Can I do this? It is not declared as mutable, so let's mutate, or no, declared as mutable. So I can actually, I can just sort my vector. Now, how the heck am I going to do this? This might be a good, well, first of all, let's commit. Day1, part 1. All right, and so we're going to want to iterate. Now let's maybe iterate over our sorted data this time, and get rid of this code. Get rid of this counter. Maybe write some more pseudocode. So iterate over sorted data and find 3 values that add to 2020. So maybe let's do the brute force option, which is to literally do like nested loops. I think that's probably like the worst solution you could possibly do, but it is a solution, and I would expect that we should be able to do that successfully. First of all, I want to know like how this data is sorted. So let's maybe do this kind of syntax. Data, I need to borrow it, or actually maybe I don't because it's mutable. I don't know yet. One day we'll know. So this is sorted in like ascending order, I suppose. And so we can just loop over this. So I would imagine I could just do for expense in data, for second expense, or let's do first expense for expense 1, expense 2 in data, Oh, I see. Okay. So, um, vector index. Can I just like grab a value at a specific index on this data type? I wonder. Let's find out. Data, I don't know, 5. Yeah, I can. Okay, great. And then how can I get its length? Let's see, data size, length, len. Okay, great. So, so let's do like a standard loop. Let mute I equals 0, let mute j equals 0, let mute k equals 0, and then loop. So first of all, in our outer loop, iterate the first expense. We'll grab the first expense. Iterate, so let first expense equals data at index I. Great, and then I plus equals 1. Wonderful. Now let's do another loop. Let second expense equals data j. J plus equals 1. And so we're doing the same thing. Loop. Let third expense equals data k. K plus equals 1. All right, so now here, check if sum is 2020. And let's format our code. Now, why is this unreachable statement? Oh, I see. For each of these, we need to actually break out as well. If k equals data len, break. So if j equals data len, break. And then here, if I equals data len, break. This is super painful, but what I'm going to do is once we do the brute force, I'm probably going to have to finish the stream, but I'll work on this and find a better solution. And then next time I stream, I can share that. And I'll put it on GitHub as well, in case you're wondering how I end up solving this in a more optimal way. Okay, so I can actually now just go ahead and check. Well, let's see if we get a, whoops, let's see if we get an answer here. Len is 2020, but the index is, I'm sorry, len is 200, but index is 200. So I think I need to actually do this at the top. That makes sense. It's off by 1 error. Same here. And it looks like Silence, I think he shared a better syntax for iterating over this. I'm going to look at that afterwards. But thanks for that. That's helpful. Okay. It doesn't look like we actually got. I wonder if we need to. Doesn't look like we got a result here. Let's actually just move this up and print all of our sums. That doesn't look right. Let's look at our data. This looks almost like it's actually just the data itself, but sorted. I'm wondering, well, that can't be it. And now I'm realizing that actually probably we need to index these. Like each nested loop needs to start at the element after the previous one so that we don't get like this situation where we're combining the same element. But let's look at our instructions again. I wonder if I'm missing some. Whoops, did not mean to do that. And so we're definitely starting at the, we're definitely getting all of our values, right? Okay. Okay. So let's step through it bit by bit. So, so we open a loop. We have this exit condition at the top, but I don't think it matters. we grab our, but let's not take that for granted. We grab our first expense, which is just the first index, index 0. We create a nested loop, do the same thing, check for j this time, grab our second expense. In this case, it's going to be the same index, but really what we should probably do is do the remaining items, but we don't have to worry about that for now. We do our third, same thing, exit condition, grab the third expense, I, j, k, the indices are correct. First, second, and third, our sum is just them all added up. And we are not getting 2020. The length of our data is correct, and I wonder, surely we're not, our data itself is correct, and just because I'm not 100% sure, I'm going to go ahead and just grab the puzzle input again, dump it back in because this has happened to me before. We don't have any kind of like git diff, so that tells me that it's not, there's nothing wrong with our data. But what I am wondering is why none of them add up to what we expect. Yeah, I'm not really sure what the problem here is, but I don't feel like any of this code is incorrect, but it definitely is, and I'm not sure why that's the case. I wonder, I'm just going to go ahead and look at the subreddit for admin of code. Looks like at some point the website was down. I wonder if anyone else was having this problem. Probably not, right? Like every time this has happened to me in this challenge, it's been something that I've just overlooked. So I think what I'm going to do is just look at it one more time, and if I can't figure anything out, probably going to call it a day and figure this out offline. So just to make sure our data is correct, I'm going to print it. And let's run that. So looks like we have all of our values. If we look at like 167 is here, 265 is here, right? 410 is here. So we're not transforming the data in any way. Like none of this code is doing anything that would make our data incorrect, I don't think. And then surely, you know, like adding three things together is not a super complex thing in this case. So I wonder where the problem is being introduced. So like maybe length, len, then okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and yeah, I think there is some kind of off by one error. I think you're right, Silence. Um, and I'm trying to figure out where in this logic it is, because it doesn't look to me like there would be one here, but I almost wonder if the if that 2019 or 2021 answers are the correct ones. So I'm going to cheat a bit and see if I can. Actually, that's probably not going to work. There's probably some combination that's being missed. And length in this case is going to be 200. So if we do have index 200, that's not going to be a valid index. That's going to be out of bounds. So this should hit every index, I believe, because if we start at 0, we grab our 0 element here, here, and here, and we're incrementing those in what seems like the right place. We're only breaking our loop if we hit the last, or if we hit the out of bounds index. Okay, well, rather than subject you to this, I think I'm going to take this offline and maybe get a cup of coffee, start the workday, and figure out, you know, maybe after like an hour or two break, come back to this and see if I can figure out where my Wi-Fi 1 error is. But it's not coming to me right now. But thanks so much for joining. I hope y'all at least enjoyed watching me struggle a bit with Rust, and I'll be doing more of these over the course of the month, and hopefully as I do them, I'll get better at working with Twitch and OBS and all these tools that I'm using. So thanks so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day.